welcome. Today we're going to talk about a bluegrass classic, Dark Hollow, heard in most bluegrass jams, I think. And we're going to talk about a specific solo, and it's a solo that Ronnie McCoury took on an album called Celebrating 50 Years of Del McCoury. Now, this album came out in 2009, I think, which was...
A few moments later. More moments later.
14 years ago. So now we're currently celebrating 64 years of Del McCoury.
Oh my God, math! Math!
But this album was a collection of both recordings from Del's career as well as some new recordings of a couple of the songs. And I think Dark Hollow is one of the newer recordings. I'm pretty sure, but either way, Ronnie takes this really cool solo. Ronnie, of course, being Del's son and a big influence in the whole mandolin world. Certainly on me, and I know on a lot of other folks. And I've tried my best. Ronnie McCoury middle part, but there's a lot of good hair genes in that family, so I can only do so much. So Del is playing this song in E on the recording. This is one of those songs, it's a singing song, and it's one that doesn't have a particular key, which can be kind of hard when you're just starting to learn. If you're trying to learn specific solos to something, you might learn something in one key, but then everybody will kind of sing it in a different key, so it can be hard. But the great thing about this solo is that it's a pretty straightforward bluegrass solo, so it's mostly using patterns, and because it's in E, most of them are closed, so it'd be very easy if somebody was singing this in D to just move it down, or if they were singing it in C, or even you could not really get away with B. It still sets up this nice framework for understanding how we can move through patterns and find a melody and make it sound like bluegrass. Before we can move on, let's hear the solo slowed down. I will say that this solo has a lot of tremolo in it that moves around in a way that makes it kind of hard to express the same way slowly. I'll do my best, but it might sound a little bit weird. It'll just be, you can kind of see what my fingers are doing. It just slowed down a little bit. So let's see what we can do. Okay, I think I did a decent job. There's a couple of things, but I do think we talk about this almost every time. With all of these things, like trying to do it note for note is maybe not the best approach, just because they're not like classical music pieces. Like there are definitely pieces that people compose that are very specific, but the goal of this is to be expressive, and this solo is definitely very expressive. And just the whole vibe is pretty laid back and bouncy. And so in this solo we have all of this tremolo, but it's still pretty laid back while pushing a little bit, and lots of syncopation. So we're going to try to figure out how we can do all of that. It is a little weird to try to do all that slow, so once we speed it up, I think it'll come together. Okay, so to start out with, we have our kickoff to this solo, and it's coming in on the second beat of the measure. So that's when I counted, I went 3, 4, 1, and then I started playing on the second beat. And like I said, this is an E, so if we make our E chord here, I'm also trying out a new mic for the instrument, so I'm trying to remember to stay in the right place. But if we make this E chord, which is just our open C chord, we keep these two, our index and our middle finger, in the same place. We put down our ring finger on the 5th fret, and then we're either not playing the open E string or muting it, whatever works for you. And then we move that shape up here. So now This ring finger is on the 9th fret of the G string, the index finger is on the 6th fret of the D string, and our middle finger is on the 7th fret of the A string. And again, we're muting / just not really playing this open E. So this is going to be sort of our home position. This is where most of the solo is taking place. But some other positions that we should note would be, if we're in E, E is the 1 chord, and the 4 chord is A, and that's going to be our chop A mostly, which is just our G chord. We add our ring and middle finger, or ring and pinky finger, to make it that big annoying chop chord. Move it up to A. And then also B, and so that's just a whole step up. So E, A, B, E. And there's other double stops in there that will move around, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Start out with, we have, so we're kind of going right into a tremolo, and that kickoff has just this little space in it that really makes it easier to characterize that bouncy feeling. And it's a really good example of how leaving space actually says a lot more than playing notes a lot of the time. So if we're starting in this position, we're going to play this 9th fret on the G string twice, and then move to that 6th fret on the D string, and we're going to let that one ring out. And then on the 4 and, we're going to play 7th fret, 6th fret on the D string. And this is setting us up to go into this double stop. And there's kind of different ways that you can decide to use your fingers for this. This is probably the most correct way, where we would keep our middle finger on the 7th fret of the A string and use our ring finger on the 9th fret of the D string. I have a tendency to favor shifting to first position stuff, but that's kind of a bad habit. It's mostly just whatever's going to work. So we'll go with this correct way, the middle finger on the 7th fret, ring finger on the 9th fret. And it's a tremolo, and again, when we're going this slow, the tremolo is kind of hard to express correctly. But we'll just keep that in mind for now. And I have written in the music 8th note rest, because there's a lot of, if you listen to the recording, there's spaces in between the tremolo and when the pickup notes are, and that also helps emphasize that bounciness. And so it's important, but it's kind of a feel thing, so playing along with the recording will be really useful. But up to speed, it sounds like where we are ending on this upstroke, this offbeat, and then before we go back into the next thing, which is really similar. We're still in this E position. We're gonna play this 9th fret on the G string again as an upstroke, and just play sort of the E arpeggio. So 9, 6, 9, E, G sharp, B. And now we're going into a B chord, and we're going to do a B double stop. And that's actually just going to be the middle 2 notes from this B chop chord. So index finger, the 6th fret of the A string, and ring finger, 9th fret of the D string. So our ring finger stays on that 9th fret. We're just adding our index finger to the 6th fret. We got a tremolo, and then we're gonna go do this cool thing where we're gonna slide up to another position. We're gonna play this, but we're not just gonna go. We're still emphasizing that bounce, so there's gonna be a little bit of a gap. So we're gonna go. let's look at that. So we're going to use the same fingers to make it easy. So we're going from 9th fret, 6th fret, ring finger, index finger, and we're going to be playing 11th fret, 7th fret. So that's, what is that? C sharp and E. And so we're going to go from here to here. But like I said, we're going to be doing this tremolo, and then we're going to stop, and then we're going to play this again really quickly, but immediately slide into the 7/11. And this is a really important move to sort of add to your repertoire. We're playing this double stop with these fingers, and this double stop is not exactly the same. It's not the same position. If we did the exact same position, we would end up with that. So we're pushing our ring finger a little, 1 fret further. So we're expanding the double stop in the middle of moving, and that's just a really useful skill in general, like being able to seamlessly transition between these different shapes. Obviously, there's a limit to that to some extent, but it really helps sort of add flow to these kinds of phrases. So from the beginning now, we have... So far, we've been moving upwards, kind of in terms of the shape of the melody. So now we're going to move back down. We're going back to an E chord, and we're just going to kind of go back down through this position. The way that it's written in the music, it has more kind of sliding into stuff. It sounds a little bit weird out of context, so I'll do the best that I can at this speed. But like I said, it's not super important to get this like exactly the same. So we're gonna go from this double stop that we're on back down to this E double stop, the 9th fret and the 7th fret, and then we're gonna kind of do this like backwards G run thing where we're going like a G run would be like, but this is we're going. So we're sliding on that first time into the 6th fret and playing our root note, that 9th fret of the G string. The getting into that is a little bit tricky. I'm not sure exactly what Ronnie's doing fingering wise. I don't think it has to be super specific. One thing is that because we chose to do this when we slid up, there's a couple of different ways that we can like sort that out. Since we're coming from this position here, we chose to use these fingers. You could either, when you get to this, you're going back to this double stop, you could switch to middle finger, ring finger. It sounds kind of choppy when I do that. So I would probably end up switching to this, like keeping my index finger on that 7th fret and then using my middle finger on the 9th fret, and then just pulling back to do that. That's just easier for me. It might be easier for you to get your hand back during that time, whatever works. Either way, we're going. This next measure is super cool, and when I'm trying to explain just sort of playing the melody or playing something simple but playing it in a slightly different way to express something differently, this is exactly what I'm talking about, where all we're doing is playing through this arpeggio. We're trying to get to this note, this what is that, G sharp note up here, but we're gonna do it in this, just using this arpeggio, and instead of just going, we have this little syncopation here where right when we land on this 9th fret on the downbeat, after we're immediately going into this 6th fret, that G sharp, holding that for a quarter note length. It's a tied note here because it makes it syncopated, and then this 9th fret, 7th fret. So that's just like a pentatonic situation. With that syncopation, it sounds like which is just like a little bit, it just makes it a lot more expressive. And one of the things that helps with that is when we do this, we're playing a downbeat when we get to that 9th fret, so it's going to be a downstroke. But if we immediately do another downstroke going into that 6th fret instead of playing an upstroke, we can give that 6th, this G sharp note a little bit more emphasis, and that'll help make that syncopated feeling really sink in. In addition to that, once we get to this note, we're going to hold that out for a quarter note, and then jump all the way up to this B note, the 7th fret of the E string. This is a trick we've talked about before where we're shooting past the note that we're going to and then going to come back to it. In this case, we're going to like the next note in the pentatonic scale. I think I've already made a mistake in the past talking about the pentatonic scale, so I'm trying to not do that again, but we're going back to this G note. But it's not going to be here. We're going to play this 4th. It's not going to be the 4th fret. We're going to play it on the 11th fret of the A string. So that lick leading up into this is going to sound like... And then we're going to slide the same thing like where we're sliding into this tremolo. It's going to be the 11th fret with our ring finger and the 7th fret of the E string with our index finger. And this is another sort of a tremolo slide move where the way that I chose to do that was like collapse my middle finger. You could do that different ways. You could just move it over. You could sort of rotate your wrist. I'm double jointed, so a lot of times I'll just like collapse that joint and hit that note. But because I chose to use that finger to do that note, sliding into this, we're starting kind of with this shape, the 7th fret and the 9th fret. But I want to end up with index finger and ring finger. So in the process of sliding, I'm bringing my index finger in behind the middle finger and lifting it up. So when it's up to speed like that, you don't really hear that change. If I tried to slow that way down, we would get... It sounds super weird to try to do that, but all I'm doing is like I'm keeping this ring finger consistent that's going up here and just lifting up the middle finger in that process and putting down my index finger. It's kind of a weird thing, obviously, but you just get the hang of it because it's not supposed to be super precise. It sounds more authentic or whatever if it's a little bit sloppier, not like super sloppy. I feel like when people try to play trad mandolin or like bluegrass or like Monroe style mandolin, they play purposefully like extra sloppy, which could talk about that like for a whole separate video, but it doesn't need to sound sloppy. It just doesn't have to sound perfect. So we're into this. And then we have kind of a similar thing where we're going to slide through some other double stops. Here we don't have the stops in between that was giving it that bounce before. We're letting this be a little bit more legato. And again, that contrast helps emphasize that. If it's the same thing the whole solo, it can just kind of be repetitive. And so by having this line be a little bit more flowing, it just heightens the effect of the staccato bits. So we're going from this double stop back down to this double stop, 9 and 7. This is a B double stop. And then sliding from that one into this A double stop. So we're playing an A chord over this, and this is the 7th fret and the 5th fret. And we're just gonna slide down with our index and middle finger because of what comes next. But let's just look at how this part sounds first. So getting that kind of clean sound, what's happening is I'm playing this double stop, and I put this middle finger down before I lift up the ring finger. So when I lift it up, it just keeps flowing into this, and then we're sliding this down, and our right hand doesn't change. It's just doing the same thing the whole time. If you want your right hand to change, you can fluctuate the volume by, this is also kind of its whole own video thing, but by gripping the pick tighter or looser, we're trying to hold the pick as loosely as possible generally, because if we squeeze, it doesn't sound very good and it puts a lot of tension in our arm. So we're holding the pick very loosely. So when it hits the string, it bends against the string before you pull through it. But if you just put a little bit more pressure, you're not squeezing, but you can control how much it bends. And if the difference is, like, this is me letting it bend versus I'm not squeezing, I'm just letting it bend less. It's a little bit louder. And so you can kind of, like, you can use that to affect the volume in the same way that a violinist or fiddle player would pull the bow and press down differently to swell the notes in a way that sounds more lyrical. That's like very like technical and advanced kind of thing, but once you like get more comfortable just doing tremolo in general, you can think about those little things a little bit more. But for now, we're just going sliding down here. The melody here it's this E note, and it's gonna go up. That's sort of what we're doing, but we're not gonna do those notes in this position because we kind of want to stay up here and keep these nice sort of middle of the neck tremolo patterns going. So how we're gonna do that is we're tremoloing on this A double stop, and then we're gonna put our middle finger, then we're going to put our ring finger down. The way that we're going to do that is we're tremoloing on this A double stop, and in the music you can see it's written for, it's a dotted quarter note, so that's 1 and 2, and on the and of 2 we're doing an 8th note of this note, which is really quick. And so when you're doing it in the tremolo, you really have to kind of divorce thinking about the right hand. Like if you're busy thinking about the right hand doing some exact number of strokes, it's just going to throw you off. So you just kind of keep your hand going, and you try to think about what this sounds like, and just do that timing with your left hand. This is staying completely consistent, so the only thing that changes it is your left hand. And at first it might get you, like I kind of hit against the string and it muted in kind of a weird way, and you can get that cleaner. My right hand is staying exactly the same. And then from there we're gonna do some more slidey stuff. Like I said, the melody is, but rather than going here, we're gonna go, we want to play this 11th fret on the D string, same as this 4th fret on the A string. And to keep it kind of moving, we're gonna slide in that same way so we're playing this A double stop. We're kind of gonna almost make an E double stop here. We're playing the 9th fret of the D string, 7th fret of the A string, and then do that move where we slide up and switch to the index finger playing this note. So now we have our ring finger on the 11th fret of the D string and our index finger on the 7th fret of the A string. And we're going to go back to this E double stop, but we can do that just by putting down our middle finger onto that 9th fret. So that whole little bit, I kind of have to do it from further back for my brain to make it work, we're gonna go. So let's try to play up to there together a couple of times, just so we can get all that in our head. Like, that's a lot of information. Let's try to just practice that. So starting from the beginning, remember, we're coming in on the second beat, and it's gonna go. And then we go into what we just learned. So we'll go 1, 2, or sorry, I counted it wrong. It's supposed to be 3, 4, 1. So 3, 4, 1. Great. Let's do it again. 3, 4, 1. Great. I know that can be kind of hard to follow along. Sometimes I run a metronome when I play those things so that it's at least like really consistent. I'm not doing that right now because, like I said, it can be a little looser. So let's move on to the next section where we have this pretty classic sort of bluegrass lick, but it looks kind of crazy written down. It is kind of weird, but once you get the knack to it, it becomes easier. And I'm pretty sure we've talked about it in other videos before. Essentially, the lick is...
It's simple.
So all that is we're sliding. So there's sort of this, I think of it as a triangle. I think of a lot of these patterns as shapes. I know that not everyone vibes with thinking about it as shapes, but I think of it like a triangle of, you have your root note and then the third of the scale. So in this case, G sharp, and then the fifth, in this case, B. You see how that makes a little triangle on the mandolin fretboard. So these notes in between, the long part in between there, those are part of what people would call like the blues scale. And so just those notes, you hear it a lot. I think you hear Vassar Clements play it a lot. There's like a lick that he does. I couldn't play it just off of the top of my head right now, but it's like, you know, it's that kind of sounding thing. And that's just the use of these notes in between the third and the fifth of something. So just what I played there is a lick. Or you could go backwards. A little weirder to go backwards. But the way that we make it work going backwards is by... Or where we have to land on one of those root notes. What's happening is I'm playing it, in this case, with my middle finger, and I'm really not trying to think that much about what my right hand is doing. It's the same thing with tremolo, where it's just going and I'm making the changes with my left hand. And I'm dragging it down, and the idea is that I'm going to stop by putting my index finger on, in this case, a G note, so a flat 3, and then slide up into that regular major third. So the way it's written in the music is as triplets, because that's essentially what it is. 1, 2, 3, triplet, da, 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 da. It works out as triplets, but I'm not really thinking of it like that. I'm just keeping my... Because it's not important for me to go triplet. And in fact, it sounds like a lot more square to do that. So you're just trying to... Just dragging your finger across those notes. And it comes back into time when you do that flat third to the major third. And we're going to land on that E note. The tricky part about this is, and again, I don't want you to think about the right hand too much. But we're going to land on this, the root note on the downbeat of the next measure. And so theoretically, we want that to be a downstroke, which means that we need for that flat third to be a downstroke. And when you're doing that triplet thing, it ends up being backwards. So there are two solutions here. The first one being that you can just like manually override that and like force that downstroke on that flat third. So if you slowed that down, you're forcing this one to be a downstroke. Or all sort of a 1B situation is you can play all of those last three notes as downstrokes. Down, down, down. Which, because of the inherent like kind of choppy nature of that, it gives it this very traditional sounding thing. Or you could just go with the flow and land on an upstroke, because in this case, that ninth fret, this E note, is being held for a quarter note. So we have enough time, if we play this as an upstroke, to reorient for playing the next downstroke. So however you want to do it. There's lots of different ways. So this next measure is even more syncopated than anything we've done so far. Kind of looks confusing. It's definitely, for me, something that's easier to just like listen to the recording and then play with it rather than trying to look at it on the page. But if you wanted to count it, we'd have that the downbeat, this E note, and we would go 1 and hold it out for a quarter note, but it would be 1, and then the next beats are 2 and. So 1, 2, and then the next beat is this ninth fret on the D string, and that's going to be on the and of 3. So that makes it 1, 2, and these are upstrokes on those ands. 1, 2, and then the next note is the and of 4, and that's going to be this 7th fret on the A string. So we have 1, 2, and 1, 2, and. Or if you fill in all the notes, which maybe I can say out loud, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Ooh, I'm shocked that I was able to do that. So just very syncopated as we go into this next. It's very similar to something we've done before. This tremolo. We're doing this double stop from before, but this time when we slide down, we're gonna play this kind of dissonant. It's an interesting thing to play over this chord. It makes it cool. During that measure, we're playing like an E7 chord, it's written, because we're preparing to go from E, E7 to A. But this double stop would be more like a B7, like this A would be the flat 7 of B. Since it's only 2 notes, it could be a whole bunch of different things. Neither of these 2 notes are part of an E7 chord. This is like the 9th and like the 4th. It's kind of strange, but it sounds really cool. And one of the cool things about it is that when we go from here, we're just sliding directly down. It's the same position, just down a whole step. And that leads us into this A. This is a kind of tricky part for me in the song, because the way that feels the most comfortable for me to do the fingering here is not very conducive. And I'm not sure, again, like I said, I'm just listening to the recording, and sometimes I can tell, but I can't really tell what Ronnie's doing here specifically. So there are two different ways that I think you could do this, and I'll show you both of them. So we're going from to this A double stop, and you could do what I just did there, is put down the middle finger on that 7th fret of the A string and use your index finger for the 5th fret of the E string. Trying to remember to put the mandolin by the mic. But the problem with that is that our next lick is like another like backwards G run thing. And that kind of needs to be in this position, like a second position, where our index finger is playing the 4th fret, not the 5th fret. You can do it where you like shift mid lick, but it's super awkward to do that. The other option is to go from here and then shift again, which is like a much more reasonable thing, but for whatever reason, like I don't like it. I would probably recommend that you do that, where you go from here to here and then shift again. So your ring finger is on the 7th fret of the A string and your middle finger 5th fret of the E string. Because then you're just already in position to go. And the timing on this, you can hear it in the recording, there's not really much of a gap in between the tremolo and this lick. So it's a little bit of a knack. Again, it's a thing where like, kind of regardless of where you are in the tremolo, you can force that downstroke. Or you could try to be more conscious of it during. I didn't even do it there. It's kind of hard for me to do that. I did just do the thing where I just played all downstrokes. Which is also an option. It doesn't have to be precise, again, like very laid back vibe here. This next measure, it's not important to do exactly what's written here necessarily, other than maybe at the end. The measure sounds like... So that kind of middle bit, there's this thing, you can hear it in like Monroe recordings, and Ronnie does it a lot too, of... There's just this kind of like... like there's just... It's just this kind of thing that you hear come up. And it's not like a very specific thing. It's different on like all of the different recordings. So I say it's not super important. The only thing that's kind of important to this solo, it's that upstroke on the very end, this and of 4, because that's a syncopated thing setting up the next measure. So when we do this lick, if you do it exactly that way, it makes it kind of easier to set that up. If there's an easier way for you to do it, it's not important as long as you kind of get that upstroke. But here's what it sounds like coming out that lick. So this next measure of E, starting from the and of the previous measure, sounds like this. Which again, all that is, it's just like a pretty standard, like bluesy, backwards G run kind of lick. But we have these syncopations in there that line up really well with what Dell's doing on the guitar. Maybe or maybe wasn't planned. I mean, I played for a long time with my dad and could anticipate what he was going to play on the banjo and match what he was going to do. So maybe it was that. Maybe they planned it. Either way, it lines up really well. It ends up being... So the main syncopated thing is the beginning. And then there, where we hold out this slide a little extra long, instead of going... And that sets up syncopation in the next measure because we land on this root note, the E note, once again on the and of 4, and that carries over into the next measure. So then in the next measure we have, keeping in mind that that E hung over from the and from before, after that and. So on the and of 1, I know I'm saying and so many times. On the and of 1, we're starting with an upstroke and then going to the 7th fret, 8th fret, 9th fret. And that little chromatic thing, again, it's that triangle thing that I was talking about, where we went down before. It's those same notes. So we're going. Just kind of moving up the arpeggio with these chromatic notes. And again, starting on that upstroke because we started from the measure before. So what that sounds like with the previous measure. And then moving into the measure following that, we have the 4 and of this measure, this where we're playing a B chord, is 9, 7. And then the next measure, that E, we're going 3 times. So flats, flat third, so this G natural sliding into the major third. So index finger. And you can see that they're not full notes, it's a grace note thing, so they're happening kind of quickly. It's not, it's all happening in 1. So we're doing that 3 times. And notice kind of how little my hands were moving when I did that. It's not like a whole thing. It's if you kind of keep it all close together, it'll help like make that sound a little bit more like it's not laborious to go. It's almost mindless, like it's just what's happening. And then we're finishing out with a little triplet. We're going to end on this 7th fret of the A string, this E note. But to get there, we're going to go. As like a mandolin nerd thing, I really like this kind of triplet. It's the same kind of triplet that I use when I'm playing like fake Irish music. And by that I mean like the Irish music is real, I just don't know how to play Irish music. And this is like the triplet that I use. Not thinking about the notes for a second, what we're doing is down, up, down, down. That can be hard sometimes, but what makes this easier is that those 2 downs are on 2 different strings. And so in this case, we're playing the 6th fret of the D string, G sharp, and then 9th fret of the D string, B. And so those are going to be normal, down, up, or down, up, down. But we have to play a second down to get to the downbeat in the next measure. But that's going to be this 7th fret like we talked about, the 7th fret of the A string. So we can go play this down on the D string and then kind of keep going down through the A string. So really watch my right hand with this. Generally, when I'm playing, if you kind of pay attention, like through all this, my hand is always kind of rocking back and forth through this, and I'm not doing that during this triplet. I'm going straight into that next note. There was no like, you're stopping that rocking motion and almost pushing that note. You want it to be like in time, but it sort of then becomes just like this thing that sort of falls off of the string pick. And I know that seems like weird, like so quick, but I'm not thinking like I'm not super thinking about the right hand. Obviously, when you're learning how to do it, you're gonna have to think about the right hand, but it's a very different motion with the right hand, and it's a lot less movement than we're used to, I feel like. So you can kind of get where that upstroke almost becomes like a flick, which is sort of how it's supposed to be, I think. Not an expert, but you know, Irish fiddle players, there's definitely like the way they do those triplets, it's almost like a whisper of a note, like the LaCroix flavor of a note in that little trill, where it just sort of is like there and then it's gone. So with those slides from before, we have, which is just great. I just love that. So that whole last line here, we have, including that, remembering that we're starting on the and of the measure before what's written right now. We have, so I hope this is helpful for you to learn how to do this. If you had any questions about this, or you want to just comment your favorite Del McCoury song, you can leave it in the comments below. If you found this helpful, I'd always appreciate it if you like and subscribe or share the video, all those things. I feel like it's so obligatory in YouTube videos to be like, please like my video. But it does help, and that help makes it possible for me to keep making videos like this. As always, the tab for this, you can download it on Patreon, be links to that. You can also comment if you have a request for something for me to make a lesson on next. Either way, I hope you have fun, you enjoyed this, and I'll see you again soon.